You can still see the snow on the ground, so it's kind of a little bit weird. So we still got some folks coming in, and I'm going to give another couple moments. But tell me what's going on in your area, guys. Hi, Christine, Kayla, Amanda. Nice to hear from you. Come on in. Linda's here from sunny Chicago. A lot of sun. This is beautiful. Yes, Amanda, we're delighted that you have power, and happy to have you from Dallas, Texas. And Abigail, of course. Sorry it's cold, Martha, but I'll send you when we're done with our little bit of balmy weather. 70s in Florida. I love it. So wow, this is great. So let's, while you're all coming in and settling in and grabbing that cup of water or tea or whatever, as we go to get started here, tell me what in chat, tell me what you'd like to get out of today. I mean, you've come to spend some time with us. We've titled this 3 Ways to Tap Chapter Relevance in 2021. But at the end of the hour, what are you really looking to have us chat about and be able to help you as you look at 2021? So it's really interesting. Sarah and I were just talking before we opened up the doors. We've been working on this particular webinar almost up to the last minute. And I mentioned that because we're getting in some cool stories up to the last minute. So chapters did some amazing things in 2020. And we're already seeing some incredible plans for 2021, which makes, I don't know, puts a great big smile on my face when I think about chapters in 2021 and relevance and member engagement and volunteer development and all those very cool things. So super excited for us to have this conversation. Thank you, Mark and Ann, Value Prop, and good to see you, Ann. What is it we are selling that means something? Yes, absolutely. Yeah, so recruiting and retaining, Mark, being that one that real critical element, or at least a real sweet spot for most chapters if they can get that engagement popped up. What's relevant? And that relevance question, Karen, is going to change quite a bit, isn't it? Yeah. And I say that because we are now moving in another level of this pandemic and the racial unrest, which means everything is going to continue to change. And I think that there's some really cool pockets that can be filled by our chapters. Yeah, Amanda, wins. So keep the chat going while we open up the first slide and talk a little bit about today. And tell us about the wins, really, guys, that you have been seeing in your chapters. So obviously, this is our monthly webinar series brought together by Bill Highway and Mariner. We are super excited to be partners with so many associations in this whole conversation. We are this beautiful marriage of an incredible technology solution on the Bill Highway side, and then a change management, volunteer development, chapter development, that kind of soft side, if you will, on Mariner side. And together, we really love to have you guys involved in a conversation, an ongoing conversation, really a community. And that brings us to the slide we always show, which is that our shared purpose is really to build this community and to connect all of you and to connect with you in terms of your individual journeys. Speaking of some journeys, we've got some really cool things coming up. So the first 2 webinars of this year were really focused on setting up all of our chapters for the incoming year. So this one is about how do we just kind of think about chapters from a more strategic thing. And then next month, we're going to talk about this whole conversation around no-go decision. How do you handle in-person versus hybrid versus virtual in your chapters? We're going to have April Roundtable, where we're going to have a deep dive conversation based on what folks want to talk about. And then we're going to have a really good conversation around chapter operations. But we are here today. And so what I really want to do is share with you what we would like to see the agenda today, to begin with this whole idea of 3 ways that we can tap chapters in 2021 by pulling from some association examples. Collectively, how can we then make the case? And then, of course, last certainly but not least is really how do we act when we get out the door, if so to say. And I think that's the important thing, is that Bill Highway and Mariner are really focused on making sure these webinars give you something to chew on, something that helps you make some good decisions. So in order for us to build 2021, it's really valuable for us to build on successes in 2020. So what I'd love to find out from you guys is what worked for your components in 2020, right? So in that chat, what worked for your components in 2021? And yes, Kayla, all the webinars are available for CAA credit. So please, if you are on the track to getting your CAE, have it, and need to renew it, you can always, of course, use this as as your ongoing professional development. Thank you, Kelly. They're talking to each other. That is going to be a magic strength, I think, that came through 2020 and can continue in 2021. So keep those coming in the chat. What are your chapters doing that worked? What are your components doing that is something you want to build on into 2021? Yes, and lots of training on how to move events to virtual, and they did it, didn't they? I've got a couple of examples from you. Thank you very much. Key questions that we're going to ask in today's conversation is, how do you show chapter value in these times? Wow, continuing to be crazy, very kind of unsettled and yet optimistic months ahead. How do you teach your chapters to share their value, right? That was a critical thing that you've already mentioned in what you want to get out of it. And then how can you use chapters in your We Care and We're Here messaging for you? We have an example that we've shown before, but I think it's worth coming back again in this whole idea of connecting chapters to HQ to member value. So let's start with the poll. And the question is, in 2020, the role of your chapter is primarily focused on what? Member engagement, leadership development, member recruitment, professional development. So they're coming in real quickly. And let's see. So letting folks keep in. We got about close to 75% of you have come in. I'm seeing member engagement was a big one. Certainly professional development delivery. All right, let's share the results. And 71% member engagement. Wow. And that makes so much sense, as we were all trying to get our members in their isolation to find each other. All right, let's go and talk then a little bit about what we've discovered in our journey as we studied what folks were doing and how you guys were engaging your chapters. And we discovered, quite frankly, that there are really 3 elements to answering the question of why we need a local presence. Now, I should have, let me pause for a moment and look at the question we're asking, because I think the question we're asking is a critical one. It's not why do we need chapters, it's why do we need a local presence? Because if you look at these 3 reasons and you come from that perspective, it opens up your ability to maybe enact the changes that you need. So a local presence is often needed for geographic related issues or geography driven issues. I'm talking about advocacy, public policy. I'm talking about the problem solving that has to happen at the local level. And of course, about community engagement. Extending the bandwidth allows us to roll out programs more quickly. We've got a couple of examples of that. And this is the one, and I've got an incredible story to share from a chapter. This is the one that I think is going to be a game changer when we begin to focus on that. And that is truly the DEI connection. We can nurture and activate the DEI conversation at the local level. Now, the story I'm going to share, the national wasn't part of it, but really the chapter became almost a textbook, I think, for how you can, how locally we can embrace this conversation. So when you think about those things, let's do a poll. Tell me, why do you need local presence? Because every organization is going to answer that question slightly different or in a different priority order. When you think about your national or global organization, why do you need local presence? Is it state or advocacy, government relations? Maybe it's those geography specific topics. Maybe it's geography driven issues, workforce development. I just spent 3 days last week with the National Tool and Machining chapter leaders, and a big conversation was around how they are facilitating workforce development, right? Local relationships, and it's not just networking, but when you think about, for example, the realtors, or for our guys, the appraisers, they really thrive on the ecosystem that they have locally. So I love it. Local relationships came off on top for you guys. And then there were the other, 35, 29, 21%, the other ones. Now, what I thought was interesting is access to next gen and key populations. That's the one I think we might want to spend a little bit of time on, because I will tell you that what I discovered with PRSA Maryland was just how rich of an opportunity we have along that ideas. Let's start with this idea of geography-driven questions. Okay, so what we understand is that local remains critical, right? That we're talking about public policy, advocacy, geography-dependent issues. We're talking about fostering relationships tied to geographic identity. So those are the things we just kind of talked about. And one of the interesting things is that with so many, I'm going to call this the just-in-time problem, right? So our manufacturing systems got to such a just-in-time that one of the things that we discovered was that our distribution channels, when they got interrupted, the just-in-time became a real problem. So I kind of talk about it. It's kind of like just in case. And some of these chapters were able to jump through some hoops and be able to fill in those gaps. And I think that's where, when we talk about geography dependent issues or topics, and that's where the ties in the local geography make such a difference. The reality is, and we're going to talk about this next month in greater detail, is that we are going to begin to return to in-person. Some of your chapters already have had some in-person. But we're going to continue to have this march back to in-person. Chapters are going to become a conduit for hybrid meetings and smaller in-person meetings. So as our people who are fundamentally social beings want to get more involved or engaged with people like them, we're going to find that the easiest way to do is going to be able to get them into those local programmings. So the question for us is, how are we continuing to support that? I think I saw in the chat, I think it was Anne, said really just pushing out a lot in the last year about how to do virtual. Now, AIA took virtual to a new level in some of your chapters, but that's how we helped our members last year really make the pivot to virtual. How are we going to help them make the pivot to hybrid, right? Oops. Let's see. Let me go back through. So let me give you some examples of this local connection. So this is one that we showed at CEX. So some of you have sort of seen this, but AGC, and I don't know if I have anybody on the webinar from AGC, and we can get the link to this video that we showed. What they did was, their chapters did an amazing job of being able to answer the question of how to get their members' businesses reopened. So some of it was advocacy, some of it was government relations. A lot of it was answering the question to PPE, answering the question to how to make the environment safe, and what do I need, and how do I get what I need to make my work site safe. So they went and they captured the stories from around the country and pulled it all together. And what I totally love about this is just this whole idea of together we'll get through this. When we talk about how do we help members understand the relevance of chapters and build them into our We Care, being able to highlight the connection, the answers, the solutions, the problem solving that happened at the local level as part of your whole process is incredible. We have a link to that full video if you'd like to see it. Another wonderful example was NACE Maine that we shared. This was about postpone, don't cancel. We have a video clip with Kathy Horner talking about this. What was really incredible. Now, the photo you're looking at with all of those event planners, right? What they did was they invited all of their members to send in a picture, and then they had somebody actually create this collage. So they don't have masks on because this was an incredible digital combining that allowed them to have the voices of all of the incredible event promoters. But this postpone, don't cancel became a substantive response to how do they keep their members in Maine whole, right? Whole in this terrible time. And it was able to be replicated across the system. So really what we're talking about, and it's a blur between the geography-driven issues and the extending the bandwidth, but what we're really talking about is that our chapters can create engagement. And you guys know this, but I want to give you examples of this, right? Can create engagement points that extend our bandwidth. But there's other ways too. In general, because they can act quicker and act more directly, they can pilot programs on a smaller scale, right? And then if they tweak and they roll out to other chapters, you're able to take something that works, AKA postpone, don't cancel, provide it in a bigger venue. Another example was getting people back to in-person events. Minnesota CAI had an incredible golf tournament retrofitted for the times. We're able to create a tip sheet that got it out to the other folks. Because they can do things in a budget-friendly way, it allows our members to get access to affordable education, and it keeps them connected across chapter lines. Let me give you some examples of how extending the bandwidth became a reality. I love this example, and I don't know if we have Diane or anyone from NAOP on here, but the Toronto chapter, which is one of their, I think it's their second largest, developed this virtual mentoring program. It was software assisted. It matched mentors with mentees and all that. Bottom line, when they discovered it, and what I love about NAOP is if you go to their leadership conference, and I've been fortunate to have done some sessions for them in the past, they have this huge display of all of these chapter success, right? Just amazing chapter success programs. And what happens is they shine the light on success, and then that allows them to replicate it. And 14 chapters at the time of this story were replicating and launching their own mentoring program. Another example comes from PMI. I don't know if anybody from PMI is on here, but guys, if you're on here, please add to the chat the details around what I'm just giving a big gloss over. But I love the PMI program. I've heard about this. I've been at the PMI leadership conferences and have had dynamic conversations about this particular thing. Tampa, Florida chapter started this. Idea was to get vets, active military, and or their family who were shifting out to get them to qualify for project management certifications, all so that they could have post-military incredible employment opportunities. Build the PMI, build the project management profession, and build PMI. Grassroots evolution, already it's been shared and replicated. So I love the example of the Educational Theater Association. You guys may have heard of this one because it's been talked about, I know, in associations now and a couple of other places. Texas schools, back in the time of Harvey, Texas schools said, we got to help the schools that were really decimated. They created this matching program. If you need help, we got help. They pulled people together. Educational Theater Association staff looked at this, said, wow, and said, you know, how do we scale this? And so indeed, they took something that was piloted like PMI did, like NAOP did, that was piloted at that chapter level and really created the opportunity to build it. Now, what I think we underestimate sometimes is just how much innovation is existing at that level. And we underestimate it because frankly, we're just daggone busy managing and overseeing and helping so many chapters. So however you can get folks to tell you what they're doing. And I love the NAOP example because they just have this long, you know, kind of like a poster display of all of the cool things as one way of doing it. But the people at Educational Theater Association just had an ear to the ground, and that's how they were able to do this. Now, what I love about the PRSA Maryland story, okay, I'm a big fan of PRSA Maryland. We managed them for years and years. They are a super group, but I wanted to mention this one because lots of national associations, and in fact, there was just a question on the ASAE component listserv, lots of question around should we do our awards program, what's the value? And one of the interesting things about the awards program, and I have to say this, and I think this is really important for us to know, is under that question, remember we said the third thing was, how do we build chapters into the We Care? The local awards program have the ability, they're more accessible to more members. They have the ability to shine the light on local heroes. Bingo, PRSA Maryland. They had this big conversation. Are we going to have an awards program? We shouldn't. People are stressed. All of our PR people are jumping in different directions. Decided, wait a minute, we need to do it because the PR profession pivoted and jumped in on valuable, tremendously valuable communications programs to help people navigate COVID, right? They did amazing things around the racial unrest and the protests, just incredible things. So they decided to add a special category. PRSA exceeded the 2019 number of entries. 11 award-winning entries came in just in the COVID program. We exceeded revenue goals, exceeded engagement goals, and shined the light on some very important work. So it was a win because they said, let's celebrate the local heroes. So I wanted to mention that because I think we need to sometimes, if the question on the component listserv, guys, was, well, should we do this? And I want you guys, as much as you can, to say, well, wait a minute, how do I help them do it? Not necessarily do it for them, obviously, but really see if you can make a difference, right? So I had to brag on this one. My son's an architect, so I'm on all of a lot of the AIA lists, and I love it. And I love the Baltimore group. But I loved it because I happened to see Anne was on our, and she's on this webinar, I think. Anne was on our idea swap. And I got to read this to you. She said that she said that what she really loved, she loved seeing across her chapters was they were lifting of all boats. And she said they were doing some amazing, amazing things. And she said they did lots and lots of components of all sizes, turned all kinds of programming virtual, from board and members meeting to continuing ed, all the way up to splashy awards program and Open Doors Baltimore as an example. This has been a very successful ongoing event. And look at this, they did a YouTube channel, but you still got the opportunity to really explore Charm City. It became a celebration of Baltimore. Oh, so important, because we were, of course, unfortunately, home to a large part of what really heated up the protest. It gave them an opportunity to highlight their members. It gave them an opportunity to have a popular event and still have it going. Now, I highlight this one, but AIA Orange County mastered virtual building tours. so that you, it's harder to do that than you would think, and yet they managed to do it. And AIA Austin transformed their massively popular and lucrative home tour to virtual. It was an enormous lift. And they pulled it off with incredibly high quality. My point is that this is the kind of stuff that comes to the heart of our members. And and you need to talk to Ann if you want to find out how to run a really incredible components program. Just an amazing, just keeping the conversation going and amazing. Now I want to pivot just a bit. I was just doing the NTMA leadership conference, and I heard this story from Maddie, who is the ED at Maddie is the ED at the Northern Utah. When National had to cancel their Emerging Leaders Conference, they said, oh no, put theirs on, pivoted it to digital, record attendance, just an amazing attendance. And people said, come on now, we need to do this more. We need to put this digital. So they're learning from this and they're going to continue to do it. So I love this. Here's an example, guys. National couldn't do it, but a chapter could. I mean, how cool is that? All right. So let's just say you want to take this triple up approach. I want to give you some hints that we picked up from folks like Ann and Kathy Horner and Kelly over at NTMA and Diana over at NAOP. When they are able to successfully do the trickle up approach, they're constantly identifying successful chapters, programs they've created. And as I said to you, it's an event, it's a tour, it's an emerging leaders program, but they're finding those successful programs, right? They're taking a look at all of them and they're saying to themselves, okay, if we'll showcase it nationally, and then let's see what the interest is. So the reason why I mention this is because, you may think something is fabulous and other chapters may say, well, that's not exactly going to meet our needs. So showcase all of these successful programs, gauge the interest. When you see a high interest, you're going to have to sit back and say, okay, so this is a high interest. Do I want to be the driver or the facilitator? And this is going to come down to which will work best within your organization. In some cases, with the Educational Theater Association, they were a driver from the standpoint of creating the process for allowing it to be replicated, AKA the matching process, right? In some cases, it's truly just a facilitator. It's the sharing of ideas. It's making sure people see how to do it. It's doing what CAI did, which was to create this incredible, let's take what they did and create a tool sheet that other people can use, right? So make the choice, knowing you do not have to do the work. You have to figure out which is going to be most useful. And then roll it out, test it, tweak it, roll it out, test it, tweak it. Now in chat, do me a favor, guys. How many of you have seen a program that worked really well and did something like this? Tell us about your trickle up approach. What do we got? Anybody? All right, I'm looking at my chat to see. Oh, and Ann is in here. I love that. Thank you, Ann. And Ann has given her email address for those that want to do it. And Diane has come on and she says, bring collaborative staff. Oh my gosh. So you're working with staff vaccination clinics by bringing together companies that staff and is presenting this to our other chapters later. Diana, that is awesome. Now you're with the Staffing Association. So I think what is really cool about that particular one is helping members tap into what is their specialty that can be used for other in other ways. Awesome. I'm going to take a little sip here. Oh my gosh, Anne, I love this, the Seattle chapter. And Brian knows some of the stuff that's going on that. And that is That's amazing. Brian is sitting in San Francisco, and he has been beating this horn about carbon neutral. And the first step to carbon neutral is carbon footprint. And I've got all geeky on you, but when you have a son who's an architect and you're trying to get him involved in his professional association, it does get to geeky. All right. So keep coming in, share how you help with the trickle approach. Now, I'm going to talk about something here that I sort of have intimated. And to me, this is an important conversation. And this is the DEI imperative. Now, admittedly, it's a hot topic. And admittedly, many of our associations are still trying to figure out what is their DEI strategy and where does it go. And there's been lots of conversation around it. And I think that this is, I know we're sort of trying to figure this out. So the three things I have picked up over this past year, and I'm going to pause for a moment because Diana's just said that partnered diversity high schools developed their own independent summer immersion program. Oh my gosh, Diana, we want to highlight that in a coming one, please. So what I have seen is that you nurture the conversations locally, you nurture their ability to have conversation, nurture their ability to allow the chapter to see opportunities, teach them to have the conversations, prepare them to have the conversations, and follow up with them, help them to deliver relevant and timely content, and create accessible pathway for younger and diverse members. So in sense, what I'm talking about is that all three of these things happen when chapters are trained. They can nurture conversations, they can deliver relevant, timely content, they can provide an accessible pathway. Yes, I want to give you an example because I watched this unfold in PRSA Maryland. Now, I was their exec director, but guys, they're very small. And so I was like many of your exec directors, not full-time for them, right? And I treated them more from a CRP because my background is CRP, right? So I really would try to encourage them to move along the process. Here's the process they followed. So the unrest, all the protests, Black Lives Matter is happening all around us. Our board gets together, emergency meeting. What are we going to do? Decides that there should be an open letter. They create this incredible open letter. You can find it on their website, in which they said this, we don't know exactly what the chapter should do. We know what we should do as individuals potentially. What we want to do is engage our community in a conversation of how can we be really, really present about this. Now, this was not the first thing they did. I should go back and say that our conference, our last in-person conference, we had a panel on improving Baltimore. And it was really about already dealing with some of the racial issues along with socioeconomic issues, along race lines, all these kinds of things. But we did that, and we convened a weekly chat in which we brought individuals together. And the idea was to spend part of the conversation on what can I personally do, and part on what can I do within my organization. So we really wanted to deal with the individual member, and we wanted to deal with the member as a professional in a place of business. And so we had this wonderful conversation, and the idea was no judgment on any side, but the idea was really about what's going to be present for you and how might you act. Now, we took that from that particular conversation, and it became, out of that conversation was a dialogue, and the last question of that particular webinar was a dialogue on what should PRSA do, right? PRSA Maryland do. They said, we need a deeper dive. And so at the annual conference, what you are seeing, there's two leading Baltimore-based DEI specialists, both within universities. TU is Towson University, incredible people. And then Tia Malloy, who's been a kind of an ad hoc person for us for volunteering, really was excited about this conversation. She was the moderator. This was one of the most successful of our virtual programs, virtual sessions, because it talked about it again from the personal, but it got deep and it also got practical. So I'm spending a few more moments here because what I loved is follow this. The board says we don't know what to do. Have a weekly chat. What should we do? Have a session and a conversation. Awesome. And then what happened next was this conversation around how do we keep this going? And we were able to have the very first diversity, equity, and inclusion committee. And you are looking at the co-chairs. Mary Miles is the young woman. Notice, love the age, right? Young woman. And Kalitha Henry is the woman on the top row. And our president is the gentleman also on the top row. They were having their first collaboration around what should this group do, right? So what I love about this is they got practical and they got timely. And their big first event was a conversation with key folks around how we're handling Black and other issues around diversity in the press, in the media. This was record registration. Over 160 folks registered for this chapter webinar, and it was a kickoff to the focus area. So now they have a committee with members and they are doing programming, and it started because the board said, we honestly don't know what to do. We don't know what to do, but we know something has to be done. Ultimately, we did, of course, have an awards program that celebrated some of the activity along this conversation. And I don't have a picture of the board. I probably should have put that to you. This all became a catalyst, by the way, for the deepest bench on the board that I have seen with PRSA Maryland, the most diverse board that we have ever had. And what I absolutely love about this whole story, guys, is do you see how it created, I should have mentioned this, both Mary Miles and Kalitha Henry and Tia, all three are now on the board, and they would not have considered being on the board until we found a topic that totally resonated, built their passion, and all the chapter did, guys, was make space for it. Your chapters can make space. That is where the relevance is going to hit the road, in my opinion, as we look at 2021. So we also have the PTA DEI guide, because this is a really good resource, and we have a link for that, I believe. So we won't want to just leave that conversation there. So a couple of things. First and foremost, give chapters a seat at the table. Tap the strengths, the personalities of those individual chapters in your national conversation. Now, I don't know if PRSA is on this call, and I apologize in advance, but PRSA, they haven't shined a light yet on this. They haven't replicated this incredible success at this level. And okay, but I want you to know you guys can do it. But it starts, though, by really giving chapters a seat at the table. Our president of PRSA is now has done a couple of things at the national level. So it kind of came in reverse. Okay. Assist chapters with their messaging and initiatives. One of the things that we pushed back to PRSA was they did not help us. We had to create that letter, that note from scratch. And we wanted to be in line with what PRSA National was doing. So go ahead, share the demographic data. Share the demographic data, guys. So that people know who's in their chapter. Recognize the capacity of chapters is different. I love this phrase, and I'm going to attribute this to Sarah. It must be vague enough to be flexible. And finally, add a content and training to chapter leaders programs. Build those skills around being a leader who embraces diversity. All right. If we as a community could help all of ourselves, what's one resource you would want your chapters, what's one resource that you would want to provide your chapters to help them improve diversity and inclusion, and the degree to which we've got that available in this community, we will absolutely get that to you guys. All right, so put that in there. How are we doing? I'm going to catch up on, while you guys are putting in this chat, I'm going to catch up on a little chat here. Just doing some amazing conversations. Oh my gosh, Martha, that is priceless. So guys, in chat, Martha Huckabee put that Colorado MGM is presented their Emerging Leaders Program, and they're serving as a consultants to other states. I love this. When we say we're going to do a chapter mentoring program, the flaw with that is that we assume that every successful chapter can be a mentor on everything. No, 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 no. Let's make these mentoring programs very specific to a success. Kudos, Martha, to you and your team for getting them involved in that. Let's see. Diana Tucker is not on the call, but she is willing and able. Maybe what we should do is get Martha, Diana, and Anne on our April idea swap and let them talk. Make a note of that, Sarah. I think that's what we're going to do. These guys are great. I totally love the conversation that's coming through them. Yes, I'm just going back and forth. Lots of good questions. But what do you guys need, do you think, in terms of the DEI? Yeah, she's going, yes, we want that. You know what? Diana, can I just tell you yes? I mean, if the strategy at your national level is to fully embrace a journey on DEI, why wouldn't you look at chapters as a channel for having those good conversations and do that good preparatory work? So not that I run your budget, but I'm going to just give you a high five on that idea. So great. Awesome. Yes. And I think that, the critical thing is, how do you recognize the unconscious bias? I mean, we all have it. I mean, I know I do. And the other element is, we were laughing. One of the slides here it wasn't diverse. And Sarah and I were laughing about this, and we said, oh my gosh, we're so busy building stuff that sometimes it's just that we don't see that until we see it. So I think I love that comment. All right. So guys, let's keep this conversation going. If there's something we can do on our side of things to help you activate this conversation and this imperative on your side of things, love to help you. All right. And it's not, it includes next gen emerging leaders. I think I want to keep this from a real good sense of how are we really diversifying and creating equity and inclusion throughout our organizations. All right. How can we act in 2021? Well, evermore, you guys have already demonstrated the importance for leadership development. I love that. You have, we really do need to build chapters into the organization's education strategy. With all the digital education, we need to pull them together. I love the work that RAPS has done on that area in terms of just rolling up and creating this calendar that includes all the opportunities, and making sure their idea was chapters are doing 101 level, we're doing deep dive levels on key things. So there was a great synergy there. Ramp up that technical admin support, continue to offer health to its age, particularly as we go into this reopening. And guys, come to the March webinar. We have checked in with a number of event planners and some folks that are doing it safely already. So we've got some great ideas and some intel coming up with that. Oh, and by the way, let me go back and just say a second. Guys, if you've got a great question, we'll take a question, but if you've got a great example of anything related to hybrid or shifting to in-person, can you reach out and let us know? Finally, highlight chapter activities with shout outs. I think that the AGC is one of the finest examples. I've seen that. I do love RAPS did at one point, and I've seen other groups do this where they say, we had X number of events and chapters and X number of this in chapters. So I think that would be a great thing to do. You guys have been doing this last point really, really well. And I just want to, I actually put this here so that we can celebrate you, give you a big round of applause, because many of you have spent an inordinate amount of time and effort to listen to your chapter leaders, understand strengths and weaknesses, and really be good fans for them in leveraging resources to them. So kudos to that, but we're going to have to keep doing it in 2021. It is a key to building trust. Let me give you some examples of self-care. So Jill Murphy, not Jill, I'm sorry, Sherry from GPA shared this. Love this. This is actually from her chapter, but number of groups have done this now. It is a chapter sent a self-care boxes to members. They purchased everything through a local charity. It's just, it really made a difference to get this kind of package in the mail. They also had self-care speakers. I love what ADHA Colorado did. They did a Take Care of Yourself series in which they had yoga one time. They had a licensed therapist was a speaker another time. They had something on self-massage another time. So really a wonderful series of self-care. But can you do this for your chapter leaders too? I think that's the really important thing. Now, I wanted to throw a highlight, and I think Emily might be on. This Emily from CAI. Yes, and Shirley's Kelly. Excellent. I don't know if you guys want to ask them some questions. I am going to tell you my version of this. Isn't that nice of me? I asked them to give me some more intel on this, and I wanted to make sure we have just a little bit of time on this, because part of what the whole listening and self-care is for us to be able to find ways to meaningfully bring into conversation. One of the things that CAI did was they created this chapter assistance task force. They handpicked the chapters of different sizes. They did a survey. They did some focus groups. They found one of the ahas was how many resources they already had. And that required some resharing, but they determined some new needs. And one of the things that came out of that, quite frankly, is the bi-monthly water cooler chats. Now, I hate to do this, but Kelly or Emily, is there anything you want to add to this? I mean, your story on this is pretty amazing. And I also see that from the notes that you are continuing to do monthly president chats as well, because it has helped them get to know a little bit better, get you to get to know them a little bit better. So can I reach out? Is Kelly or Emily on the call that you want to unmute? I can't unmute. Oh, that's because probably Sarah has to do it for you. Sarah, can you take care of that while we're sitting here?
Hi, can everybody hear me?
Yay!
Okay, perfect. So yeah, we put together this task force, and it was really an evaluation of how the chapters were doing because of COVID, both financially, what they were doing with how to run events, moving everything from in-person to virtual. Some of our chapters were holding weekly events, and so it really displaced them with everything that happened. But so we started having these bi-monthly water cooler chats with all of our chapter executive directors and chapter staff. And we also started having monthly calls with our chapter presidents, so that they also were having a voice and having a way to talk to each other. And we are continuing to do those. They found that it's a great resource to do them. It's great to talk to each other, and the ideas that came from it. And then depending on the conversations, we actually have additional short webinars that are anywhere between 15 to 30 minutes, maybe even up to an hour, about successes that the chapters have had. So a couple of the chapters, for example, were able to hold golf tournaments or virtual exhibits. And so they would just share their experiences, and it gave them the chance to, watch it through the recording or reach out to ask questions or to partner with each other. And that was the biggest thing, is just being able to partner together. And we also were able to come up with some other ideas too. For example, the majority of our chapters were using Zoom, and so they had to have that purchase. And we were able to look into it, and doing a group buy of Zoom was actually cheaper than each of the chapters doing it themselves. And we got more resources out of it. So we actually, as a benefit to our chapters, we purchased the Zoom licenses to help save on those costs. And so we were able to find some of those kind of group buys that really benefited the chapters so that they could have more of those resources. And that all came out of the task force that we put together.
Excellent. So what's your plan of action, if you will, for 2021? You said you're still having the bi-monthly water cooler chats, and I know that you're having some of the chats with presidents.
Yep. So we're still having all of those chats. We've actually already done, I believe, 2 or 3 sharing sessions where people have shared successes of how they did things and how to do things moving forward, including, how to do a hybrid education event. We also, we did the group buy of Zoom for 2021. So all of our chapters have access to Zoom. And we also bought all of our chapter staff ASAE memberships so that they also could have access to additional resources. We found out that, again, doing that group buy was a lot more cost effective than the chapters doing that themselves, and just the resources that are out there right now. So yeah, and we're still talking with them. So we're still asking them, what do you need assistance with? We're also talking by group or by geography and by size. And so the chapters who maybe are our small chapters, they don't function the same as our very large chapters. So we're making sure that they have the space to talk to each other as well.
Right. I love this. Thank you so much for jumping in. Does anybody have a question? You throw a question in the chat if you'd like. The real reason why I wanted you to sort of jump on here is because I can speak to some of these things, but I think that you can express the value of that, and just you sort of said has kind of helped you know where to apply the resources instead of guessing. But also you're activating each other to be able to do that. Okay, excellent. I love that, Emily. So it's not a promise that you're going to do it, but it is an opportunity to let them be a kind of a focus group for you. So that is really great. Thank you, both Kelly and Emily, for jumping on. And Sarah, I guess we'll add them to our panel for how to do that. I wanted you guys to hear this story, those of you that are attending today, because I understand that we're working in an area, time of limited resources. Now, CAI is a little bit larger. They got a lot of staff at the local level. So obviously they've got some, they've got some heft or some, depth, maybe is the right word to say, in terms of their chapters, in terms of working with them. But this is infinitely scalable to an all volunteer chapter force, from the standpoint that you are going to be using it very intentionally. This is not just a, hey, what are you thinking? But what's present to your chapter right now, and how do we create the right sets of resources? So thank you very much for that. And that gives me an opportunity to segue into, part of the beauty of what CAI has, quite frankly, because I've had the wonderful chance of working with Kelly and Emily on a couple of different things, is this idea that they've already made the case for chapters. And so I watch folks like CAI and AIA, and these folks have made the case for chapters. And I say, okay, what did they do that allows them to continue to be able to be spry, if you will, flexible? And one of the things that you guys can do if you want to make the case for chapters is pull your numbers together, make your case. Now, a lot of us are talking about reaching members that we hadn't reached before. How can you get that number, right? The number of events or different services that were offered. How can you get those numbers? How many times did they share info and resources? So a great example is both folks from the state societies around ASCO and the states and the societies around ADHA. They basically took the national information and resources on COVID and absolutely got them in the hands of their members. So how can you tangibly do that? What are the advocacy wins? So if you look at an AGC where they were able to, get construction sites in many places allowed to be essential businesses, or ADHA where they were able to get the right safety protocols in for dental hygienists. Advocacy wins at the local level. And what about retention numbers? I mean, one of the things that we're finding out right now, according to the Community Brand Survey, which was pretty extensive on Association Trends 2020, if you haven't gotten it, download it. They were talking about members are, and I'm going to get the numbers a little bit wrong. 39% said their association was more than, it was more important now, but it rolled around to this idea of the industry information and the connection to peers. Chapters are doing that. So how are your retention numbers going? So all I'm suggesting here is that you got to pull the numbers. Don't look at the reports you've done in the past. Look at what changed, and then be able to say to the C-suite, to your CFO, to your budget person, whoever, hey, look, you need, these are the numbers. These are the numbers. And then make sure you're capturing the intangibles. So what insight did you gain through chapter activities? Like, did you find out, for example, that they tended to bring in people that you never saw? So now all of a sudden checkbook members became present members. Insight gained about members through the chapters. Well, it turns out that the geographic connection is important when it comes to X. So this is how we want to put our efforts in for the chapters. Maybe the intangible is progress on critical issues around trust, collaboration, the ability to work together. So, I love how Kelly just mentioned with CAI, they're getting people together by region. And I'm sure that there are some regional collaborations that are happening there. But the more more your leaders show up to your monthly chats, is demonstrating a growing trust or collaboration. So guys, put these numbers together, make your case. And finally, when you put these numbers together, tell the chapter value story. Tell the chapter value story. All right. I think that what I've heard from Kelly, and we saw in the information that Ann shared, and we heard with Martha and a number of people, we have to help our chapters find their game. And that means encourage them to share their 2021 plan to you now, right? Maybe create a quarterly goal and give awards to chapters that meet that. This is a great way of celebrating every quarter, like couple of these groups did it. This is something that AADE, the diabetes educators, actually integrated when they went to a new chapter system. I worked with them, it's been quite a few years now, when they segued to a new chapter system. And one thing they wanted to do was they wanted to be able to give more ongoing feedback. So they set goals, and every quarter they announced the people who met those goals, and they got things like discounts to the product store, a free free webinar for members. They got banners if they met a couple of them that had their chapter name on it. Anyway, every quarter they did this so that people could see their wins throughout the year. And finally, give a template to chapters to share their value. So what I'm saying here is, the value of membership. Create something that they can insert their name into it and be able to share it. Make it a fun infographic, right? Do something that's going to capture the excitement of the value of chapters. All right. So, we understand that a huge conversation for our chapters is how to make the go, no-go decision. And part of what their plans for 21 might be around this. That's why we're having this particular conversation next month, an opportunity for folks to really be able to, I want you to be able to help your chapters to make these decisions. So we have reached an incredible point here. You see me grasping for conversations for words. I'm just so super excited to be back with all of you. And it's a wonderful opportunity, I think, always for the Bill Highway team and the Mariner team to give back to the community. I couldn't do this without Bill Highway, and Bill Highway and Mariner could not do this without the wonderful community. And thank you very much. Shelley jumped in, Kelly from NTMA jumped in to give us some ideas. Of course, Emily and Kelly from CAI. A number of you just jumped right in to help us put together all of this. And I'm just telling you, that thank you on the screen is because Sarah and Charlotte and Paige and Peter and I and Mark and all the team, the joint team here. Thank you. Hats off to CRPs who are making their members and their leaders' lives better. It's been great. Hope to see you next month. Hope to talk to you before next month. See you guys later. Bam.